All right, welcome back. In this video, we're concerned with giving our character hair. Now, we know that the Valley of the Ancient material contains hair. If we browse to our skeletal mesh, we'll see that there's also this echo hair. And this is great. We could add another skeletal mesh component and attach it to the head and all that, but I'm going to show you something even more interesting. Let's go to our Valley of the Ancient folder, and in Characters Echo, there's a folder called Hair, and there are some assets here, and I'd like to double-click on this one here, Hair S Updo Buns. Double-click that, and this is a Groom asset. Groom assets make lots of tiny little hair strands with all types of parameters. You can change the strands parameters, change how this looks. I'm not going to dare touch it because this looks amazing. This looks like real hair. And I'd like to use this. And there's also another Groom asset called Eyebrows L Echo. And here we have the same kind of thing, only it's eyebrows. So these were made for Echo, and they look really great on Echo's head and face. And so I'd like to add Groom components that we can have on our character, so the character can have hair and eyebrows. Now, a Groom component is a particular C++ class that we can look up in the Unreal Engine documentation. Now, I'd like to go into Unreal Engine documentation and search for uGroom component. uGroom component is the class that we're interested in. Now, it doesn't say anything here, but it does show us that there's an include, and it's groom component.h. Now, by default, we can't use this header file because the code for the Groom component exists in this module called Hair Strands Core. You see, Unreal Engine is made up of lots of different modules, each of which contain code for specific things. And the Hair Strands Core module contains the code for Groom components. And this is not included by default because it's not just assumed that you're going to use Groom components. You have to actually specify that our project should build with this module. And that's what we're going to do. And to specify which modules to include when we build, we go to our build file. That's going to be our /build.cs file. It's here in our source folder. And if we click /build.cs, we have this C# file. Now, you don't have to know C#. All you have to understand is that we're including the modules that we specify here. We specify them by strings. And this particular line here says that we're including these modules by default. These include much of the core engine code that we've been using thus far, but we're going to add to this list. We're going to add a comma with another string, and this string is going to say hair strands core. Now, we're using strings here, so it's really important that we get this spelled right and typed exactly correct. Otherwise, this isn't going to work. But if we specify this, we can then build and have access to all the code in Hair Strands Core. Now, when we add to our build file, it's usually a good idea to regenerate our Visual Studio project files. And that's because there are folders that contain things that need to be updated, and to update those and make sure that we're building with the correct file, we're first going to compile here in Visual Studio, which means I'm going to go ahead and close out of the Unreal Engine editor and Control-Shift-B, that's build solution, Control-Shift-B, just to compile our project here. But then I'm going to close out of that too. And I'm going to find my project here in Explorer. And in my project, not only do I have my .u project, that's my actual Unreal Engine project, along with my Visual Studio solution, I also have these folders, and some of these are auto-generated. They get generated every time we compile, and we're going to delete these and generate our Visual Studio project files so everything is fresh. So the files that you can delete when you do this are the binaries, the intermediate, and the saved files. Now, by the way, derived data cache is also auto-generated, but I'm not going to delete that. This contains asset information that's sort of pre-loaded, so it doesn't take forever to load up a level because all of the stuff that it needs to do to load that level is cached here in the derived data cache. So I'm not going to touch that, but I am going to regenerate the binaries, the intermediate, and the saved files. Those three are okay to be deleted because they'll be auto-generated for us. So whenever we add to that build file, it's a good idea to do this process. So here's the process. Delete the binaries folder, delete intermediate, and delete saved. And we'll get those back by generating Visual Studio project files. Now I'm also noticing this black alder. It looks like it's a PNG, and this came with the black alder trees asset pack. I'm okay with deleting that as well. I don't care about having it there. And we're going to regenerate Visual Studio project files, and we do that by right-clicking the .u project and selecting Generate Visual Studio Project Files. And check it out. We've already gotten some of these files back. Now, we didn't get the binaries back, but we'll get that back in just a second. But once we've generated Visual Studio project files, we now need to build our /module. Remember, our game project itself is a module, and we can build that by simply double-clicking our .u project, and we'll be asked if we want to rebuild the module. So we're going to click Yes. And we'll give this a moment to regenerate. There's our binaries folder. It's back already. And we'll wait for Unreal Engine to launch back up. And we've launched back up. Now I'm going to close out of Unreal Engine right away because we plan on doing a hard compile from Visual Studio. So I'm going to go ahead and open my Visual Studio solution now and open it with Visual Studio 2022. And now that we have our module, Hair Strands Core, we should have access to the code in that module. So we're done with our build file. So we'll close /build.cs. And now we can add a groom component. In fact, we're going to add two. We're going to add one for the hair, and we're going to add one for the eyebrows as well. So this is actually pretty awesome. Now, I'm going to forward declare the uGroom component type right up here at the top. So I'm going to say class uGroom component. And now we can add a couple of private variables down here at the bottom. So we're going to make a uGroom component. That's a pointer. And we're going to call this hair and make it visible anywhere. So let's give it a uProperty with visible anywhere. And we'll make another groom component. So uGroom component pointer called eyebrows. And we'll give eyebrows visible anywhere as well. So we'll copy that uProperty and we'll have eyebrows here. And we can give this a category. We can say category equals hair. And if our category is a single word without any spaces in it, we can actually just say category equals hair without quotes. So that's just an aside. And we're going to put hair and eyebrows both in the category hair. Okay, so now that we have hair and eyebrows, let's construct these in /character in the constructor. And first we need to include the header file. And just to remind you, the groom component is in groom_component.h. Pretty easy to remember. So let's include groom_component.h. And now we can construct our hair and eyebrows. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to take our hair and we're going to use create default subobject, just like with any other component. And we're going to specify uGroom component. And we're going to give it a text name called hair. Simple enough. But we do want our hair to be attached to our mesh. So what we're going to do is take hair and call setup_attachment. And we want our mesh. Now the mesh is not directly accessible. If we just type in mesh, there is a variable called mesh, but it's private. So we need to use a public getter function inherited from the character class called getMesh. So we can always get the mesh with that public getter getMesh. Now we're attaching to the mesh, right? But the groom component class also has a member variable called attachment name. And this is a variable of type fString. And we can specify a socket. There's that word again, socket. We don't know yet what sockets are. We just know that we can attach things to them. We're going to attach our hair to a socket that exists on our mesh, and it's called head. So we're going to create an fString and initialize it with the string head and attach our hair to the head. We have to do this, otherwise our hair will not attach properly. Now we're going to do the same thing for the eyebrows. So we're going to say eyebrows equals create default subobject. It's going to be another uGroom component, and we can give it the name eyebrows. And we'll do the same thing here. We'll take eyebrows, call setup attachment, and attach to the mesh. So we'll call get mesh here, and we'll take eyebrows and set its attachment name variable to the value of an fString, and we're going to use head. So we're going to attach both the hair and the eyebrows to the head. Okay, so let's save all, and we're going to go ahead and compile and launch from Visual Studio. So I'm hitting Control F5 to compile, and I'm going to wait for Unreal Engine to launch back up. Now I can open up my character blueprint. So let's go to Blueprints, Characters, BP/character. And now we have eyebrows and hair, and these are groom components, and they're attached to the mesh. So let's zoom in and take a look at our character and see what happens when we set these. Now, just like skeletal mesh components and static mesh components, these components have variables inside of them that we can set here. And the groom component has a groom asset variable. And if we click the dropdown, we can see the groom assets that exist in our project. And the one for Echo's hair is called hair s updo buns. Let's click that, and there we go. Look at that. The hair looks great. I'm going to click on the camera so we're not selecting it, so we don't get that yellow outline. And there's the hair. It looks so real. But what about the eyebrows? Let's set those. So let's select our eyebrows here, and it looks like I actually set updo buns for the eyebrows. So I clicked the wrong thing. So I'm going to change this to eyebrows. And there we go. We have some eyebrows, and they look great. And I'm also going to select the hair and set the hair groom asset to updo buns. And now we have both hair and eyebrows. And this looks great. All right, perfect. Let's compile and save, and we can go ahead and press play. And it looks like generating Visual Studio project files has sort of reset this minimal default level. So that's kind of annoying, but that's okay. We can take our game mode override and set it to bird game mode and click play, and we have our character. And Echo has hair and eyebrows. We can hit Shift F1 and detach and zoom on in and see the eyebrows and see the hair. And suddenly, Echo looks a little bit more stylish. Awesome. Check out the ear gauges. Isn't that cool? All right, so we have hair, and this is a great next step because now Echo looks a lot more realistic. That hair texture on the scalp of the head wasn't really cutting it for me. I think real hair on a groom component looks a lot better. So great job. We now have hair. We're now ready to continue with our character because really this isn't all that great just yet. Echo's sliding around, and even though Echo looks great, Echo isn't running and walking. So we're going to take care of that next.